Twitter? More than Twitter? On Twitter, here's a question for you. How open or closed should you be? And what I mean by that is you can have it, I don't know if I'm using the right term, you guys can tell me or not, but my understanding is on Twitter, you can just let it automatically, if somebody wants to follow you, they click follow, when they're in, they're following you. Or you can lock it down a little bit that they have to request, and you have to approve them, which is what I've got set up. What do you guys do? What are your thoughts on that? Is one way better than the other in terms of attracting potential clients or referral sources? We didn't talk about this question, we were preparing.
Well,
I just thought of it.
I mean, from my perspective, I think generally speaking, you need to not mix your personal use of social media with your business use of social media. I think you absolutely cannot do that. I know people who think they can, and they have their friends on there as well as their business colleagues, and I just don't think it can be done effectively without basically making one group or the other mad. So I think that first and foremost, if you're going to make that restriction and say this is just for business, I see no reason to restrict who's following you. On the other hand, if you're going to mix those two things together and use them for social and business, you definitely want to restrict who's following you, because you may be posting things that you don't want clients to see or opposing counsel to see. And so I think that fundamental decision has to be made right up front. I don't know, Alan, what you think.
Well, I think my answer is a little bit different for Twitter as it is for Facebook, because with Twitter, you have a little more control over what's on your Twitter feed, because you're the only one who can post to it. On Facebook, your contacts, if you have it set up kind of the way that it is set up by default, any of your contacts can post on your timeline, and you can control what you post, but you can't necessarily control what your audience posts on your wall. So on Twitter, I'm actually pretty open. I don't really care who follows me, because they can't really comment on my stuff anyway. On Facebook, I found that privacy settings are my friend. And so when I have, I do mix my business and my personal stuff on Facebook, but I keep them, I mix them in that I have one account, but I compartmentalize them in that I have, my business contacts in one group and my personal contacts in another group, and I control, who gets to see what. Google Plus makes that a little easier in that it will ask you whenever you post something, who do you want to see this? So that's, I haven't really done too much on Google Plus yet, but I'm going to check that out some more.
I really, like Alan, with Twitter, it's easier for me to separate that. I started both my Facebook account and Twitter account as personal accounts, and the Twitter I use exclusively for business now, and the people that follow me, it's all for business. And I was just looking through the list of people that follows me. I even have the governor of Minnesota following me on Twitter. So, and he, I think, was connected through other people that I've connected with. It's I say to you, Lenny, it's just like getting your first client. Your first client's going to get you your second client, your third client, and so forth. It just when I started getting followers, it just started getting more and more. My Facebook account, I'm not so good at separating the two. I've if some family pictures come up and I get tagged, if they're pictures I don't want out there, you have the option of taking the tag off of there. But normally it's not a problem for me, and I've got a lot of stuff out there from my military background, and I think that's what my clients want to see. They want to know that I am who I say that I am. So to me, that kind of adds some of the background adds to it. But you do have to be careful. You don't, especially criminal defense. You don't want too much of your personal information getting out there to be used against you someday. So I try to be very careful with that. You gotta, most of you know, you've gotta kind of build that wall between yourself and your clients. like giving out your cell phone number. Some people have different ideas of doing that. I try to limit that as much as possible, but you can't have an absolute barrier. So that's what I say on Facebook. It's not an absolute barrier. There's going to be some spillover. So.
But yes, and maybe we'll start with you on this one. You know, one thing I found since I got on Twitter and Facebook is it actually can be a lot of fun. Especially on Facebook, you go to one person and somebody else, and next thing you know, you spend an hour or two playing around, which is fun, but it's not very good in terms of either generating business or doing the work you have sitting on your desk. So what do you do to make sure that that you're using it effectively, these sites, but you're not wasting too much time or energy to do a lot of posting and a lot of things that then you're wasting time?
Well, I think I kind of take a similar approach to that as I do with email, which is I have sort of a designated time of day when I do that, and so I'll take like the lunch hour to be on Facebook or Twitter, or whatever, more Facebook than Twitter, I guess. And then outside of that, I might go on for a couple minutes at a time. That I'm usually pretty disciplined at not being too involved outside of my designated time, I guess.
And this, and I think for Alan and Dan and John too, I know you both have mentioned to me that there's some sites you can go to that allows you to do a post, and it'll spit it out to Twitter, to LinkedIn, to Facebook, to whatever else.
So I use a site called Twitter Feed, and you can sign up. It took me about maybe 5-10 minutes to create an account and to put my blog on there. And what it does is it checks your blog, in my case, every half hour. And if it sees something new, it will propagate it to my Twitter feed. And then my Twitter feed, in turn, automatically propagates to Facebook. So when I create a blog entry, within half an hour, it's on my Twitter and on my Facebook.
Let me just talk about how I use LinkedIn. I don't think we've talked too much about LinkedIn so far. I've been kind of a reluctant or just a slow mover on LinkedIn. People send me their requests to connect to me all the time, and I connect. But what I've discovered is that LinkedIn has networks. And what I've connected into is networks of, for instance, of military veterans that are transitioning out of the military and they're looking for jobs. And so with LinkedIn, you can get emails when there's new postings to this discussion, and you can monitor the discussion. And I've continued to do that, and I've been able to help a few veterans that are transitioning out. But I've also gotten a couple clients that are having problems with employers as they deploy. There's laws for deployed service members, and I've been able to find out that they're having difficulties, and I'm a lawyer. Yes, sir.
John, I know we talked over lunch. You're familiar with the Solo Small Listserv, and I'm sure a lot of people here. And I find it's great for lots of reasons. I too belong to a lot of groups on LinkedIn, perhaps a dozen, and I have found it typically either nobody posts or it's just the same person who posts and no one comments. And I think part of the reason, I'm not sure why, I think one of the reasons is it's not a very user-friendly system compared to a listserv. And I'm sure there are lots of others, but I've always thought that it could be a great way to, for marketing on these groups, but as a practical matter, they're virtually dead. Am I right, or is it? And I'm in different types of groups, so I would think that one of them, at least one, would be.
I will tell you that it's one group that has been very active, and they get a lot of folks that do it, but it's driven by a guy who's written a book, a retired military guy, and he's really made some aggressive and good connections throughout the United States.
But do a lot of people comment?
On this particular one, but I have other ones from law schools that one person just posts, and it's just it's not there. But my opinion with LinkedIn though, and with all these different social media, you got to be in the game. You got to have your profile in there, and that's the way I looked at it, and that's how I did it to start with. But then as I said, I was kind of reluctant to follow along with it because I saw LinkedIn. There was just nothing there for me to really work with. I've already got a job. I don't need to link in somebody to get a job. They're more linking into me to help them get jobs. But then I discovered this one where I did get a couple of clients. So, but most of them haven't, and but I have.
Because I know a lot of people use the Solo small listserv as a great marketing tool.
Yeah.
And it's very effective, but but the reason why it's effective is it's very active.
I would, for me, Roy, I'll just speak my own experience. I probably on a dozen groups too. Some are very inactive, but some I'm on are very active. And I'm just thinking right now, the ones that seem to be most active do have 2 or 3 people that tend to get the ball rolling consistently, but then they are pretty active. But that's really all I'm going to say today, because as I told Lisa, by being the moderator, I don't have to actually know anything. I just have to answer questions. Dave?
The internet's all about metrics and data and keeping track. Don't these groups usually have a site that tells you who's on it, or how many people are on it, or how many posts per day, so you can avoid the black holes that Roy's running into?
You want to do your technical stuff? Dan?
Well,
Is
we
that a segue?
we could get into that, although it, with respect, Dave, I think you're asking about groups on LinkedIn and other kinds of groups, and that data is out there and available, but you have to pay for it to get the real metrics. I am a big supporter that if you're going to do this, before you start, you need to figure out a way to measure what you're doing. How are you going to measure what you're doing? How are you going to know if what you're doing actually turns into dollars in your bank account? And you have to come up with a system for that. And there are a number of options to do that. It's easier with a website than it is with social media, but there are ways to do it. And we could talk about some of the slides if you want. I wanted to go back to what John and Alan had said about kind of these propagation sites. And some of you saw me just typing on my phone here. I think smartphones are great for this. I was just posting on a site called Foursquare, which is a site that links into LinkedIn, and it basically tells people where you are. And if there are other people who are at the same place you are, it'll tell you who's there. It's an interesting site that allows you to put some, it gives people kind of a geographical representation of where you are as opposed to just your opinions on the web. And so it's an interesting site to use, but I wanted to make sure that I posted that I was here. But I use a site called ping.fm. And I don't know if any of you use that site, but ping.fm is an interesting site because you can post things to Ping and it'll go right to LinkedIn, right to Facebook, right to Twitter, right to your blog site, everything all at once, just from that one post. And you could post videos, you could post pictures, you could post all kinds of things. And I think that the real key is to pick a time, and I think it should be every day, and I don't use more than 15 minutes. 15 minutes, and that's when you're going to do your social media stuff. Because I think it's also important to try to do it at the same time, whether you do it once a week, or once a day, or once a month, but try to pick the same time, because then people will get used to getting things from you. The other one that I wanted to just mention is a site called, or a feature called Google Alerts, which is in Google. And basically, you can go in and put keywords in there, like I have bankruptcy, I have environmental contamination, and I think I have another one. And it scours the internet every day, and it sends you an email once a day of all the stories. And so what I do for my social media updates is I go open up my Gmail account, look at what Google Alerts sent me for that day, and I pick one and I post it. And that's all I do every day. And so it's a real quick and easy way to up, and it goes to Ping, so it goes to all these different places. One of the other things I think that's important is if people look at building their own websites, is to make sure that your web designer sets up your site so that when you make a post, it goes into the content on your site. So it's not just nebulously out there in Google or in Facebook or something like that. It's actually in your website. So Google sees it as new content in your website. And so as you talk to your web designers, you want to make sure that it does that. And then we were talking about metrics, right?
Yeah, but let me, well, go ahead, Dan.
Well, you just, it's going to take me a while to get this stuff up, so go ahead.
Well, you brought up the websites, and I've got a couple of questions for the panel about websites. One is, how do you use Facebook, Twitter, other things, so it's not simply redundant of your website? You put a blog on your website, exact same thing on Facebook. At some point, Facebook becomes your website. what's the point? So how do you interact with the two? And then Dan, maybe you can follow up, because when we were preparing, Dan mentioned to me that he thinks websites are becoming obsolete. And so I'd like you to talk more about that too, Dan. But first, so everybody here have a website? I assume everybody, or most people have websites, yeah. How do you interact or link Facebook, Twitter with the website and prevent them from becoming just your website light?
Well, we just debuted a brand new website yesterday, and so we're about once a year, we're updating our website, and then we're keeping it fresh, trying to blog on it, so that's one way,